Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. We are back here in the end to start off this week. Thank you guys so much for your support on End Week. I'm really excited that you guys were into this project with the villagers out here in the end city in the background. And I've been doing a little bit more work off camera just to get these guys feeling a little bit more at home. Obviously, we've got all of the beds and workstations out here, mainly for the purposes of breeding. I kind of wanted them to be able to meet in an area that's kind of central, and their work and their beds are all here. And as you can see, we have ourselves an iron golem in the end. This is a naturally spawned iron golem. It's so cool that these guys actually generate as part of village life out here. And some people might be wondering exactly how it is that village life can even happen, considering that there is no real sun and moon out here, and I'm going to cover that a little bit today. That was quite a common question in the comments of the last video, so I thought I would spend this episode, maybe a little bit of a shorter episode, explaining exactly how time works in Minecraft and why a village can function just like normal in the Nether and the End when villagers can't see the sky. But first of all, I'll give you a quick little tour. I've been building some of these little village houses as kind of a reminiscent kind of feature that the villagers could maybe have something that looks like the overworld, you know what I mean? Like, so we could have something that helps them feel a little bit like home. But what I actually want to do is take some of the features of the end city, like these structures, these kind of tiered cake-looking structures over here, these upside-down cakes, and what we're going to do is make some of those individually on the ground, because my problem with the end city construction is that villagers can't find their way up these tall towers. So if we're trying to emulate the structure of the end city, we probably just want to make a few of these kind of pod type things and have villagers living in those. And this grassland area here is already kind of filling up. The houses I've built are a little bit big and squat, and they don't tend to fit in the space, especially with all of the trees around. So I'm going to expand this area out in this direction. Oh, there you go. You can see that another baby has been born. They are slowly filling up to the number of beds in this area, and we have a lot of very cool librarians around the place, so I'm sure we will catch up with some of them a little bit later. But now, we got a sugarcane field over here, and I've been working on expanding this out, continuing my cliff design here and working with a little bit about how this terrain is going to be supported and formed, but I think we will probably just expand most of the rest of this out as grassland and start to build copies of these using overworld materials, so oak and birch and that kind of stuff. We're going to emulate the style of those little houses here and there. I do also want to build a more permanent ship dock over here so that we could maybe bring some animals over here and have the semblance of like a shepherd's life out here with a couple of sheep and that kind of thing. So we can work on that in future. We'll probably continue a little bit of this week. It's not going to be End Week 2, the sequel. We're not going to spend the entire time in the end, because I imagine people will get a little bit tired of it. I have one other project that I want to do in the end a little bit later on this week, but that's going to be a separate video. For now, let's talk about time. Let's talk about exactly how these villagers are able to maintain their routine out here, because as you can see, they are roaming around like normal, they are meeting, they are going to work, they have been able to sleep every night and get up the following morning. They seem to be perfectly at home here in the end, despite the fact that we cannot see whether it is day or night. They can sense it somehow, and exactly how this happens is kind of an interesting thing about Minecraft, and that's something that I will take you to the overworld to explain. Hey, welcome back to the overworld, and actually this is perfect because the sun is going down and I'll be able to reset the daylight cycle in just a second. But for now, I'm going to grab myself some gold nuggets out of here. In fact, I've got a clock in here already, but I may as well remind you how to make a clock. You need 4 pieces of gold and some redstone. However, there is kind of a neat trick you can do, because when a clock appears in a crafting table like this, in a crafting table interface, even if you're looking at it as part of the uncraftable recipes, let's say I didn't have all of the ingredients in my bar, all I have to go through here is to find a clock from the recipe book, like so, and you don't even have to make it. It is still technically showing you the accurate time of day here in the overworld. As you can see, the day is rolling over into night. But let's make a clock anyway. We've got one in the chest there, but let's make one for the purposes of carrying it around with us today. And as you will see, the clock is currently showing that it is most of the way into nighttime, and the sky outside is reflecting that. So let's hop into bed, reset the daylight cycle, watch what happens to the clock very briefly, and then we'll go into exactly what the mechanics behind this are. Because as you can see, the clock spins a little bit, and suddenly it's kind of in the opposite position. Now it is starting the day instead of just starting the night. And as we come out here, as a player, you'll be able to see the sun rising over that hill over there. The moon has already set on the opposite side, and it's daytime. This is the time when no mobs are going to come out. It's the time when you can do all of your farming and so forth. You don't have to rely on block light for stuff spawning, with the exception of pillagers, but that's kind of a new thing, and we've covered them in a little bit more detail. But this is when you can rely on skylight to do its thing, and the sun will proceed across the sky following a very straight path until it sets over there on the horizon. The sun travels from east to west in the overworld, the moon rises in the same place and does exactly the same thing, and the day begins. But let's talk about how Minecraft in the code measures time, because that's integral to understanding why villager routines work in the Nether and the End. So Minecraft actually operates on a system of game ticks. There are 20 game ticks per second, and a lot of the time that is what determines how fast things like crops grow and how fast certain actions happen within the game. It also determines certain things like redstone timing, and there's all sorts of stuff that goes into the measurement of a game tick. So there are 20 ticks in every second of Minecraft gameplay, and if you multiply that by 60 to get the amount of ticks that are in a minute, you get 1,200 game ticks, 1,200. Now the Minecraft day is exactly 20 minutes long. It takes 10 minutes for the sun to travel across the sky and set on the opposite horizon, and it takes the moon a further 10 minutes to travel across the sky and set and begin a new day. So 1,200 multiplied by 20 is 24,000, the exact number of game ticks in a Minecraft day. And that timer runs regardless of which dimension you are in. So while you're in the overworld, you'll be able to see it visually represented by a rotating skybox. That's effectively what the sun and moon are in Minecraft. They are part of the skybox. They are illusions. They don't really dictate when time goes and when it doesn't. Now, for example, if I go to options, video settings, if I go to details, I believe, yeah, and I can turn off the sun and moon. So the sun no longer exists in the sky, but that hasn't disabled the day and night cycle of the game. It's still rotating, it's just removed those elements from the experience. Even without the sun visually appearing in the sky, crops will still grow, everything will continue as normal, skylight still functions. You'll notice I've turned the sun off in the video settings, but monsters aren't spawning everywhere, right? So what we need to understand is that the sun and moon are really just there to prompt the player to see what time of day it is easily without having to rely on stuff like a clock or redstone timers or anything like that. You know it's daylight outside, therefore you, the player, know what's up. You know what time of day it is. I'm actually going to put the sun and moon back right now because that feels a little bit creepy, but there we go. It's really weird not seeing the sun in a completely blue sky. But there we go, the sun is back, and you're probably used to seeing it in the day. Now let's talk about what happens when we go to the Nether and the End, because the Nether and the End are designed to trick the player in terms of knowing what time of day it is. Obviously, we as players are very used to the fact that the Nether does not have a sky as such. It's got a cavernous structure, which means that more often than not you are seeing a ton of netherrack above you, and even if we come up this ladder and go up beyond the bedrock ceiling at the top of the Nether, it doesn't really have a sky, or it does, but it's not a functional sky in the same way that the overworld is. We're talking about a complete red haze as far as the eye can see, and time here, for the player at least, doesn't quite seem like it works the way it does in the overworld. If I take out the clock right now, you will see in my hand and in the hotbar there, it's spinning wildly. It doesn't know what time it is, and so as the player, we are tricked into believing that the day-night cycle does not exist here in the Nether. And that is not, strictly speaking, true, as we can now understand from the example of the villagers that I've moved to the end. We could make a village up here on the roof of the Nether if we wanted to, and they would still function exactly as they do in the overworld, finding their beds, finding workstations, and doing all of this at very specific times of day. Not only that, but it is possible to grow crops in the Nether and the End using artificial light. So the ticking over of the game, the stuff that those game ticks control, has not been suspended while we're here in the Nether or the End. And yes, some of that stuff like crop growth is technically speaking only possible when the player is around. So there are definitely some factors which control that. And maybe crop growth isn't the best example because that's also controlled by a series of random ticks that decide when the crops are going to grow. But even so, like, it still happens on a sort of clock. And we can prove once and for all that time still functions in the Nether and the End by using a command. I'm going to do this just for demonstration purposes, and so I'm going to type /time query, and we're going to use daytime. This will tell you the exact time of day it is in Minecraft's code language, in-game ticks, basically. So we're going to hit that, and it's going to be 15:346. So by that, I can determine that the sun has been set in the overworld for a little while, for about a couple of minutes. How have I done that exactly? Well, in the overworld, the sun rises, or the sun, like, dawn basically begins at 0 ticks. The game starts at the 0 in-game tick time. And then it proceeds across the sky for 10 minutes until it reaches 12,000 ticks, which, remember I said, is 10 minutes worth of in-game time. And that's when the sun starts to set on the western horizon and the moon starts to rise in the east. Then another 12,000 ticks later, just as it's about to hit 24,000, it wraps back around to 0, and that's when the new day starts again. If I run this query command again, you'll notice that has moved on by about 1,000, because I've been talking for a little under a minute about this. And as you can see, that still functions in the Nether in a linear way. As we go through this, every time, a couple more seconds have gone past, it has increased by a linear amount. And what that means is that even though you cannot see the sun here, even though there is no day or night, no time is present for the player, and even the clocks go haywire as soon as you enter the Nether, Minecraft's in-game clock is still ticking over in a very precise fashion. And that's what allows villagers to understand whether or not it is day or night. They're not doing it based on the position of the sun like you are as a player, even though the illusion is that they keep their daytime quite similarly to how the player does. They're actually doing it all based on Minecraft's code. And now that I've come back through to the overworld, believe me, this is the overworld. This is my stronghold portal room. Don't worry. The nighttime, as you can see, is in full swing, and our time query shows that it is just after midnight. It's just after 18,000 game ticks, which is basically 12 midnight. That's when the moon will be at its highest, and it will start to go over again, and as you can see, the clock is kind of reflecting that. Now let's go through to the End, and you'll notice that the clock here immediately does the same thing that it did in the Nether. It's going a little bit haywire, it's spinning wildly, but if I query the daytime again, it has moved on just a little bit, and it's still following the same in-game clock. That is a permanent thing, regardless of where you are in the world. And you might also notice that when I come back through to the overworld, if I've queried the time in either of these dimensions, it matches the time that's in the overworld. So these dimensions don't each have their own in-game timer. It's not a separated thing. They all follow the same day-night rules as they would in the overworld. So if you're playing on a multiplayer server, for example, when your friends' villagers are sleeping in the overworld, your villagers in the End will also be sleeping because they're following the same in-game timer. So to further prove that it is nighttime right now, I'm going to try and, fly back through the portal, and we're going to head over to the End village. It may take them a second because last time I had these chunks loaded, the villagers were all up and walking around. If it's nighttime, they should be, they are all sleeping in their beds. Fantastic. So that, as you can see, is proof that it is currently nighttime in the End. And if we query the time, you can see it's now 20,000 ticks, approaching 21,000. Now we'll sit around and wait and watch the Iron Golem push the villagers out of their beds a little bit, but when the time rolls over to exactly 0 ticks again, you should see these villagers start to get up out of their beds. They're going to behave as though the sun has just risen in the overworld, and they're going to carry on with their normal working day. In fact, if we want to, we could speed this up a little bit by adding game ticks ourselves, by using time add, and then let's say 2,000, just to speed it on a little bit further for the purposes of this video. Now, once you'll see when they get around to daytime, it's going to come up any second now, and they'll all start hopping out of their beds and beginning their workday. There you go, and let's query the time right now, 70. So it has literally just ticked over from nighttime to daytime, and the villagers know it, and they are out here and they are working regardless of whether or not they can see the sun. So some people were a little bit concerned that the villagers would never wake up once they went to sleep because it's perpetually night here. Technically, as far as the game is concerned, it's not. So I hope that clarifies some stuff for you guys. I hope you can now understand that the daytime is sort of created for the purposes of the player, and that for the purposes of the stuff in the game, they can carry on their routine as normal, which is what makes it possible to have a village out here in the End Islands that functions as a village in the overworld would. Now, a lot of the other questions on that episode were, are there going to be raids out here in the End? Technically, pillager patrols can't spawn out here. The End has its own spawning rules as far as what can appear in this dimension. Now, the villagers have created an iron golem, so that at least is possible. It's possible to create iron golems out here, but since I have created this village, and I've spent a little bit of time with them now, I haven't seen any cats spawning either. And that is because cats can't spawn in the End. They're not on the list of mobs that it is possible to have here. I mean, you can bring a cat out here, but it's not possible for cats to naturally spawn. In the same way, it is not possible for pillager patrols to naturally spawn out here either. So you won't find roaming bands of pillagers just because there is a village here. In fact, the pillager patrol spawning has virtually nothing to do with the existence of a village. They just interact with villagers and try and attack them if they end up in the same radius as a village in the overworld. However, if I go into the overworld and get the bad omen effect and come back here, a raid will happen, because that overrides the spawning rules to carry out a raid event, and the raid event would probably break if it couldn't spawn pillagers here, because it would load up the boss bar and then nothing would happen. So I think it's kind of important, I guess, that you can have raids in this dimension, and that if you're starting a village out here in the End, you should be a little bit careful about whether or not you travel to this dimension with bad omen. Ultimately, though, that is something I want to do out here. I want to be able to defend against a raid out here in the End, just because it's such a weird thing to happen that I think it could be quite entertaining, and I think some of you guys agree. So for today, that is where we're going to leave this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the mechanics of time in Minecraft. It's something that I didn't know if I was really going to need to cover, but this seemed like the ideal opportunity to do so. And probably in tomorrow's episode, we will stick around in the End here just to start off with, and we'll deal with how exactly we can stop the Endermen from stealing all of the grass and dirt that I've laid down here, because they are stealing it block by block, and it's starting to get to me. So we'll cover anti-Enderman griefing in tomorrow's episode. But for now, that is going to be it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. My name has been Pixlriffs, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.